Black Hooker, a.k.a. Street Sisters, was a 1974 film marketed to blaxploitation audiences. Directed and written by Arthur Roberson, he drew inspiration from his childhood in rural pre-civil rights America. Over 30 years later, the director's son would send a letter to the Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia and attempt to explain why his father's film was not racist. So what went wrong? It helps to know that before it was a movie, it was a play called Don't Leave Go My Hand, written by Roberson and directed by Van Til Whitfield, and it was well received by audiences. Joseph Holson, a TV industry veteran, had just started a new film company with his friends and thought Don't Leave Go My Hand could work just as well on screen. His company offered Roberson the chance to adapt his script and direct the film. Now let's run through the story. In what looks like 1920s America, a black prostitute has left her young mixed-race son with his grandparents on their farm. As the boy grows up, he feels confused and rejected, especially when his grandfather seduces the girl he has a crush on. The boy leaves for the city to try to reconnect with his mother. Tragedy ensues. This is not a good movie. It's still very much a stage play, and even sometimes looks like it was filmed on a high school stage. At its best, the camera work is on par with 70s church movies, all yellow haze and lens flares under a flute solo soundtrack. It's not a funny, not a sexy, not an action-packed movie. It's a melodrama in the first degree. They don't even bother giving the main characters names in the credits. They're called Grandpa and Painted Woman and Boy. Boy is played by two actors. Young Boy is played by Ted Quinn, a TV child star of the 60s and 70s. For the grown-up boy, Roberson decided to introduce to the world Durey Mason. Maybe the director thought that casting a white actor would help audiences of all colors understand that these tragedies were universal, as well as issues like family dysfunction or the oppression of poverty. But the effect is too jarring. All I kept thinking of is,
I was born a poor black child.
Steve Martin. It doesn't help that Mason plays the role like he's still 10 years old, when he actually looks old enough to enlist. Most of the other actors play it for the stage instead of the camera. The most famous face was Jeff Burton, cast as Grandpa. He was Charlton Heston's co-pilot when they crash-landed on the Planet of the Apes. TV veteran Kathryn Jackson as Grandma brings a lot of heart. And surprisingly, the most cinematic performance in places comes from the working mom, Sandra Alexandra. At least the role allowed her more than one emotional setting. And whether the makers or not intended it, the Painted Woman ends up seeming the most in the right. In a host of bad situations, she put her son in the best one she could find. Unfortunately, even that choice wasn't a good one. The filmmakers took 2 years to bring Don't Leave Go My Hand to the screen, but audiences didn't respond as they hoped. To make their money back quickly, the producers decided to sell to a different audience. More footage was shot, including a fist fight and 2 sex scenes, starting at 16 minutes and at about 46 minutes. Just look for the body doubles. And that bumped the movie to a more adult rating. And the marketing focused on the prostitute mother, retitling the movie as Black Hooker. The changes were not enough to make it a hit or keep the film from fading into obscurity. The Jim Crow Museum of Racist Memorabilia is a museum located in Ferris State University, Michigan, and their mission is to catalog and contextualize artifacts related to racist and intolerant perceptions throughout American history. Black Hooker was added to that collection, which received an unexpected response from the director's son in a letter sent to the museum in 2006. In the letter, the son explains that Roberson's defense of his casting choices were to demonstrate that, quote, color didn't matter. The letter also reveals that the producers had initially talked with Burt Ward from TV's Batman for the mulatto role, but Roberson had his heart set on Mason, as in a love at first sight thing. Crucially, the story was inspired by Roberson's experience growing up as a mulatto child to an absent father and a prostitute mother. But there were significant changes in the story, colored by the writer's own harsh perception of his family. To be clear, this was the last movie most of these people made. Helson's film company folded, but he refocused his career on sound editing and Foley work, and had a busy few decades. Ted Quinn grew up and became a rock musician and radio personality. Speaking of music, before acting in this movie, Sandra Alexandra was a classically trained pianist turned recording artist of pop and soul tunes. After she didn't become a movie star, she returned to music, and she's still touring the world today. Her most recent album, recorded under the name Cassandra Durkin, came out in 2014. I can't recommend her music enough. So, how to watch this movie? It's less blaxploitation and more hicksploitation, with a predominantly black cast. And this movie doesn't really deliver on the exploitation angle anyway. The most interesting way I found to watch it was to puzzle over the film's intent and compare it to what ended up on screen. It doesn't make the movie better per se, but it made it more interesting to me, spending less time being confused by the bizarre choices and more time appreciating them.